Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled Neighbor and the Koi Pond. I take a lot of pride in my house and especially in my front and backyard. My husband and I have spent a lot of time maintaining it and making it a place of relaxation, a place where my family can always come to and feel stress-free at the end of a long day. A couple of months ago, my husband and I were making some changes to our backyard and decided that we wanted to install a waterfall that would lead into a medium-sized fish pond. While we lived in a friendly neighborhood, our next door neighbor did not seem to like us for whatever reason. I can recall a few years back when we put a Buddha statue in our backyard, she complained about it to one of the other neighbors, stating that it was an eyesore and offensive, because we knew she was a God-fearing woman and warrior. I obviously did few any harm by putting a Buddha statue in my backyard, and it was in my backyard and fit in perfectly with our theme of relaxation and tranquility. To be completely honest, I was not even aware she could see it from her backyard. I mean, most people don't think, Jesus, I hope my neighbor cannot see this from her backyard because she might be offended. There was another instance too when she complained that we had put our garbage cans in front of her house. This was also not the case, and while the garbage cans were overlapping and in front of her driveway, it was not our fault. The garbage truck had clumsily put it back after dumping the trash out, and it rolled down the gutter a little to stop in front of her house. There have been a number of small petty instances like that with this particular neighbor, so I guess I shouldn't have complained about the koi pond and waterfall we had put in our backyard. The waterfall was not huge, it was only about 4 feet tall. It had a gentle stream of water flowing down some rocks that led into the koi pond, and it was quite beautiful. I loved sitting out on the patio drinking a cup of tea and listening to the gentle flow of water on stressful days. But my neighbor did not enjoy our new pond. While the trickle/stream of water was audible, it was in no way loud. However, my neighbor came knocking on our door one day that we needed to shut that damn thing off because it was keeping her awake at night. I found this funny because she was acting like it was a giant rushing flow of water or a river that had a rapid water flow. Like I said, the waterfall itself was only 4 feet tall and the sound of the water was very gentle. I told her that I was not going to change anything about my backyard and that she should start minding her business and pay attention to her yard because it was looking neglected. While I admit this was petty of me, I just couldn't understand why someone felt entitled to complain about something that was in my backyard and was not actually disruptive to her or the neighborhood. Well, a couple of days later my daughter came to visit and all of us were sitting on the backyard patio. We were having a couple of drinks and eating dinner, and my neighbor actually had the guts to poke her head over the fence and yell at us that we needed to get rid of the fish pond. She stated that the pond smelled like the ocean and the smell was making it so that she could not enjoy her backyard. This was obviously another attempt at a petty confrontation because the fish pond produced no smell at all. I was getting tired of her petty remarks and the fact that she always had something to complain about when it came to us. I was also really upset that she would interrupt my family time like this just so she could express her dumbass opinion over something that was not even true. So I decided that it was now my turn to be petty. I went online and found an Etsy shop that sold garden statues of a giant middle finger. It was a little expensive, but I was so pissed off at this lady that I honestly didn't care. It was going to take a couple of weeks to arrive, so I had hoped and prayed that she would not complain about anything else in the meantime, or I might have really lost it. While I, myself, did not hear any complaints from her, she had complained to my husband again about the fish pond and the overall look of our backyard. She told my husband that there was no point in us trying to live like peaceful hippies, because all we did was cause her stress and we were terrible neighbors. Again, I had no idea where these complaints were coming from, because we had never done anything to annoy her or to try and get under her skin. Well, except buy a giant middle finger statue and place it in our front yard so that it was facing her house. See, when the statue came, it was unbelievably heavy and we had denied the delivery people's help because we underestimated our strength, so we ended up dragging it on its side in order to pull it up the lawn. Well, when we stood it up, it just so happened to be facing her house, so I thought that it was perfect. My neighbor was positively pissed after she came home one day and saw the statue. But my mission was accomplished because she actually stopped complaining after this. As a matter of fact, we became really great friends. She had come over one day and apologized to us for being so bitter about things that did not even matter, and had also explained that her husband was sick and she was stressed and using us as a punching bag. While I didn't agree with this, I also understand what is important in life and could not stay mad at her forever. We talked frequently and even had lunch several times in my backyard, yes, in front of the fish pond on the patio. The last time we talked, however, she had stated that she would be moving soon because she wanted to be closer to her husband's medical offices and doctors. I just hope that when that time comes, the new neighbors can take a joke, because as of today, the statue still sits in our yard and we laugh about it all the time. And yeah, ripe stars, I guess that is an investment for the future, because you never know what kind of neighbor you will get in the future. The statue might come in handy at some point. Either way, if you enjoy the stories about crazy neighbors, then I would really appreciate it if you could also like the video if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. Frequently, we pretty much always reach 1000 plus likes on the video, and that just makes me extremely happy and it helps me tremendously. Thank you so much. And the next one was posted by user LoveBugHugs on our own subreddit r/ripe stories, and it is titled Out of the Mouth of Babes. To those who don't know me, I'm a mix of Cherokee, Blackfoot, Jew, and my sweetheart of a son is half African American. I lived life on a high-octane, caffeine-overloaded, sleep-deprived candle burned at both ends edge. Because I held a specialized universal nursing license that allowed me to travel different states and countries, most countries that is, I could always gain employment almost anywhere worldwide. Now, I was a member of a world-renowned rescue/first response organization, and part of agreeing to be on the active unit, one had to be willing and able to relocate at a moment's notice. Depending on the relocation requirements, this could mean relocating home. This is a tale of one of those moves, a tale of woe and fear that would make Edgar Allan Poe truly green with envy, and his raven turn its feathers from ebony to pea green ivory. We had replanted to a north/western part of our little world 3 years prior. Now, this particular part of the world would be snowbound sub-zero temperatures, most times into the -20s, because we basically had just 2 seasons, 3 summer months and 9 months of 6 to 10 feet of snow. No complaints on our side. My son was by then a child of 6 years and took to the snow like an Eskimo. By then I had been a widow for a few years, would take my double-skied crotch rocket to and from work in the winter months. When the teething chains would get pulled off the gears, I would have to play fix-it man, and on those times I would come home caked in snow, ice and gear oil. Getting a new man of the house was still out of the question for me. Freedom, sweet freedom. One day my rescue unit notified me I would be given a bump up and a reassignment. Yahoo! No more human popsicles. I was made Lieutenant Colonel and made a regional lead instructor. Great, more work and more responsibility. I made a mental note to buy stocks in all major coffee companies and search for doctors willing to give me daily infusions of that sweet aromatic liquid black gold. We had our lives packed into a long bed semi in 3 days, new school arranged for my sweet son, and new hospital floor position waiting for me. We awoke to the first kisses of the new day's sun, rolled up our sleeping bags and walked out of what was once a house we called home to 5 feet of freshly fallen snow. The cursing I committed that morning would have made the most jaded of sober sailors on shore leaf blush with seafoam green envy. We managed to pull out around 10 AM after bench pressing 5 tons of snow. By then, most city main streets and highways were plowed. We pulled onto the highway and put a few hundred miles behind us when we had to pull into a wait station. After the officers cleared my CDL, insurance and trip documents, I asked them about the state of the pass. This pass would chew up gears on empty semis, and the thought of having to deal with snow and black ice with a full-loaded semi had me nerved. I didn't want to blow the cab up or run it into the ground. We put a few hundred more miles past us. That pass was then a couple hours ahead. We pulled into a greasy spoon to fuel up and grab a few bites of myocardial infarction, inducing puddles of gloopy sludge that resembled burgers and cheese fries. And by the way, Ripe Stars, now I just noticed what this style of writing reminds me of. Maybe I'm completely wrong here, but for some reason it really reminds me of the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Anyway, as we were chewing, I noticed 8 salt licks rolling towards that grate from hell. I thought to myself, great, that salt came from the angels above to sprinkle grainy salty gifts. They were massive dump trucks that would generously sprinkle a mix of sand and rock salts on risky sections of roadways. So we pulled out to follow those blessed beasties with salty wings down that pass. Funny how it seemed everyone else read my mind. We managed to roll out of winterized zones in one piece after days of miles and miles. We rolled through plains, roads that cut through acres of plowed over farmlands, etc. Our truck engine started showing signs of having caught a cold with coughing and sneezing and clearing its throat. We pulled into a truck stop that had an in-house mechanic. He said he would once over it for me while we grabbed some heart attack chow. Mechanic said he couldn't find anything wrong, that maybe it is just me hearing things. Annoyed with his insinuating I didn't know anything and didn't know what I was talking about, I called the company I rented the semi from and put the decision to stay put or roll on them. They talked with the mechanic for a bit and then told me the truck was fit to roll. I asked them if they were sure. They said yes. Okay, we rolled on our way. Around 5 PM that same day, we had smoke billowing out of our smokestacks and a gritty roaring sound suddenly start out of our engine. I pulled over to a safe spot on the side of the road, pulled the hood and set out flashers. I called for a semi-tow to the nearest semi-repair shop after notifying the rental people of the breakdown. After the mechanic told me the catalytic converter blew up, he asked me if the engine made sputtering or lurching noises earlier. When I explained to him the entire story of earlier that day, he shook his head and muttered how he hated men pretending to be mechanics. He called the rental and explained the situation to them. After putting them on hold, he asked if I put regular gas in the truck. I said no, and he asked if I had any way to prove it, because they are saying you are responsible for the breakdown. After I gave him all the refueling receipts, the mechanic told the rental place I hadn't and that I only had diesel fuel receipts. They then made him go receipt to see if consumption met mileage, and it did. They then tried to claim that I ran the engine into the ground and I should have just pulled over at the first sound of problems. They denied that I did just that and even denied them telling me to roll even though I said the engine was making noises. When I played back the call to them earlier that day, my cell was government issued and automatically recorded all calls to them. They finally relented to coverage under contract. This mechanic smiled at me and told me that I was a tricky lady. Rental ended up having to arrange for a new semi for us, as this shop was in the middle of nowheresville and lost town and didn't have the right parts to get us up and rolling in time, as shipping the parts in would take weeks. I had to make the East Coast and had 9 days left to do it. On the road again, happy to be on the road again. In my best singy-songy voice, we rolled on down the highway, the 9 of us. And yes, 9. What I haven't mentioned to you, my dear readers, is when I say we, I meant the whole family, as in 2 weenie dogs, 2 cats, each had 22 toes, and 3 parrots, each in their mobile cages, all stuffed into the sleeper of a 2-seater cab. We were Noah's Ark in a sardine can. And now, my dear readers, we were all tired of the travel, the miles driven, the greasy chow, the poor sleeps, and even more tired by thinking of the miles we still had to go. We are down to 4 days, almost there, we just had to keep pushing those miles on. We pulled into a fueling truck stop a couple cities over from a city famous for its bottled hardcore liquor. And by the way, guys, I am wondering what kind of city that is, because I cannot really think of any American city that has the same name as a popular liquor. If you know what OP is talking about, then please let me know in the comments. Anyway, as I climbed out of the cab to pump, my CAG, out of her frustration of being held a prisoner, let out a loud, "Help me, oh won't somebody help me?" I chuckled and shut the door and went in to unlock my pump. As I was walking back to my truck, the trucker in the fueling bay next to me glared at me. I sighed and just started fueling. After I filled both tanks, I went in to pay. The checker looked nervous and distracted, her hands shook and she kept looking around. I wasn't really sure what was going on. I was so tired, everything just went over my head. When she said the register was jammed, I asked her if she could pay me out on another register. She said they were all closed. She spent a ridiculous amount of time fiddling with the register. A man suddenly came up and whispered something into her ear. She smiled at me nervously and cashed me out, gave me my receipt, wow, it suddenly worked again, and sent me on my way. When I walked up to my semi, both it and I were surrounded by police, guns drawn. They were screaming orders at me to get on the ground face down with my arms extended out. I was cuffed and searched. I could hear my son screaming, "I want my mommy," over and over. I was sat on the raised step of the pumping station 2 bays over from my truck. An officer kept demanding to know where I had taken the child from. I kept telling them he was my son. They kept telling me to tell the truth, that he is obviously not my son, that he was black and I was white. And by the way, guys, apparently these cops did not finish high school. Anyway, the cop then said that they received a report from someone claiming they heard a child screaming for help out of my cab. That funny how they found a child in my cab. I finally jolted out of my dazed fog and put the pieces together. I tried explaining it was my cat, not my son, who screamed. I tried reasoning with them how I was a nurse and was with a government rescue team trying to relocate to my new assignment. Nothing I said seemed to help. They stuffed me into the back of a squad car. I sat there stewing with anger, frustration and disbelief. An eternity passed when a semi-tow truck pulled up. They huddled to discuss how they would get the semi out of the bay to hook it up. While they were still talking, I heard one officer tell another to pull the animals out of the cab and he will have animal control pick them up. I then watched in horror as another squad car drove away with my son. I felt then that my entire life was over. I watched in tears as a cop climbed up into the cab when suddenly I heard my cat scream, "Help me, help me, help me! Oh, won't somebody help me?" That cop jumped backwards out of that cab, stumbled onto his ass and started laughing so hysterically he almost weed himself. The trucker who was in the bay next to mine screamed, "See, I told you there's a child in there calling for help." An officer asked him if that's the same child's voice he heard from before. He affirmatively answered yes. The officer who was running things ordered the squad car with my son in it to return. I'm creating new rivers, bawling my eyes out. As I was sobbing tears, I was forced to stand near the front of the squad car. I watched as I saw my son roll slowly past me, screaming for help. When the squad car stopped and they let him out, my son ran to me and wrapped his little arms around me. Long story short, I got my son back, my freedom back, and was told we were free to go on our way. They called it just a misunderstanding, no hard feelings, okay? Yeah, okay, dolts. I said I would never put this city's hardcore liquor to my lips, and I haven't to this day. 3 days later, we pulled into the city I was assigned to when my son asked, "Are we there yet?" I laughed, cried, and then laughed some more. Yes, sweetheart, we have arrived. I explained to my son many years later what actually happened that day, and we still laugh about it. And also, my cat still calls out for help when I force her to shower. Mental note, never ever teach a parrot to say help me for any reason, no matter how funny I think it might be. Lesson learned. And yeah, Mrs. Lovebug Hugs, once again I gotta say, this is one of the best stories I've ever seen on Reddit. You are really one talented writer. Thank you so much for posting these stories on our subreddit. Absolutely mind-blowing. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.